So today what I want to do before we continue in chapter 8 is go over some radical review. Okay, how to simplify a square root or simplify a radical. Okay, so that's what that symbol for square root is called. It's called a radical. Okay, so here I have the product property of square roots. So for any numbers a and b, where a is greater than or equal to 0 and b is greater than or equal to 0, the square root of a times b is equal to square root of a times the square root of b. So when we multiply two roots together, we multiply them inside that radical. Okay, so 1 here, we want to simplify the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. So all I have to do is multiply my radicand, which is that inside number. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9, and I keep it under that radical symbol. But now I can take the square root of 9, can't I?
Yes.
It should equal 3. So when I multiply a square root with itself, those roots just cancel each other out, and you do end up with just the number on the inside. Do you see that? So I have square root of 3 times square root of 3. My roots just cancel out. I end up with just 3 as my answer. Okay, so we'll see that again in example 2. If I multiply my two numbers together here, I get the square root of 25. And again, I can take the square root of 25. It is just 5. So you do see that root cancel out when you multiply them together. That's something to just keep in your mind as we're simplifying here. So next example, example 3. This time I have square root of 7 times the square root of 3. So we're going to do the same thing. We just multiply the numbers on the inside, keep it underneath that radical symbol. Okay, so I still have a square root. I have 7 times 3, that is 21. Okay, and then I would just leave it as the square root of 21. Okay, you don't need a calculator. Okay, don't need a calculator. Just leave it as the square root of 21. Okay, next one, example 4, same thing. We multiply our two radicands together, so 5 times 2, and keep it underneath our radical symbol, so we get the square root of 10. Okay, questions so far? All right, we're going to make everything a little bit more complicated. It's not really complicated, but we're going to simplify it further from here now. So in number 1, we're going to do the same thing we did in example 3 and 4. Okay, we can multiply these two together, right? So I have 3 times 6 to get the square root of 18. But the square root of 18 can be simplified. Okay, I can simplify this. So I want to see what numbers multiply into 18. What's an easy number that multiplies into 18? Yep. 9 and 2. So I'm going to split this into the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. Because I can take the square root of 9. Right? So what is the square root of 9? 3. Okay, I can't take the square root of 2, so I just leave it like that. That is my simplified answer. So you want to try and split your number so that you have a number that is a perfect square. Okay, I knew that 9 did have a root. Okay, I could take the square root of 9. That's why I wanted to split it up like that. Okay, don't go to example 2. I want you to try example 3. Okay, same type of process I just did in number 1. Okay, so do number 3. Well, you can simplify it.
Please, just gonna simplify those parts. Alright, just find it all. I totally probably. Ow! Did you hear that crack? Oh my god. I thought I broke something. There's no cure for the common cold. I'll give us. Jack? Let me
Aaron, swipe up.
He swiped up and
Swipe out.
All right, we're gonna come back together. We're gonna come back together. So, I think most people got at least the square root of 50, right? Okay, I can simplify this square root of 50 further. Shh. I can simplify the square root of 50 further. So thinking about what goes into 50, is there anything that I could multiply where I have that perfect square? It is 25. Okay, so I have the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. Okay, 25 times 2 is 50. Now I can take the square root of 25. That's 5. I can't take the square root of 2, so I leave it as the square root of 2. And that would be my simplified answer. Okay? We're going to go up to number 2 now. Shh. You need to pay attention to this part because you're going to be doing it a lot in our next lesson that we do. So, in number 2, you have a square root in the denominator. You cannot have a square root in the denominator. Okay? It just doesn't look very nice. So, we want to get this square root out of the denominator. To do that, you have to multiply by a version of 1. That version of 1 is whatever number is in your denominator itself. So I want to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. This right here, what I'm multiplying by, is 1. If you were to type that in your calculator, it would be 1. Okay, so it's not changing the problem at all. That's why we do that. So from here, to multiply fractions, we multiply our numerators together. So we have 12 times the square root of 3. So I'll just leave it as 12 square root of 3. Okay, you can't multiply it into the square root. Okay, that's over. If I have square root of 3 times square root of 3, that's the square root of 9. Okay, I can take the square root of 9, right? Yes? Okay, so I end up with 12 times the square root of 3 over 3. I can simplify this further. I have 12 over 3. That's just saying 12 divided by 3. What is 12 divided by 3? 4. That would be your simplified answer. Are you still with me? Do you have questions on what I just did? Okay. Looking at number 4 then. This is just what we did in 1 and 3 here. I can multiply these two together. I end up with the square root of 30. Does that simplify further? No. Okay, I could multiply 2 and 15. Neither are perfect squares. I could multiply 3 and 10. Those aren't perfect squares. I could multiply 5 and 6. Those aren't perfect squares. So this one does not need simplifying. Okay, do number 5. Do number 5, please. Do number 5, please. So this one you do want to simplify. You're not multiplying anything into it. I want you to simplify it.
I'll hit him with
It's not right now, subject.
All right, so most people are finishing up. I do want to keep going so that I give you plenty of time to work on your assignment. So this one does simplify further. It's very similar to number 3. So 2 numbers that multiply into 75. I have 25 and 3 because I can take the square root of 25. So once I take the square root of 25, I end up with 5. I can't take the square root of 3, so I'm just going to leave it. And that would be my simplified answer. Questions on 5 before I do 6? Okay, so 6 is a little bit different. This time there are numbers on the outside of your square root, right? If there are numbers on the outside, we do the same thing as we normally would. So multiply the 2 numbers on the outside. So 8 times 9 is 72. And multiply the numbers on the inside of your root.
72 and root 12.
Now the square root of 12 can be simplified. Okay, square root of 12 can be simplified. So off to the side, there's 2 numbers I can multiply, one of which I can take the square root of. 3 and 4. Okay, I can take the square root of 4. That's 2. And then I'll leave the square root of 3. Okay, because I can't take that evenly. So now what I want to do, instead of the square root of 12, I'm going to replace it with 2 times the square root of 3. So I still have this 72, and we're going to multiply it by 2 times the square root of 3. So that means I have to take 72 times 2 to get 144. And then keep that square root of 3 multiplied in. 72 times 2 is 144. Okay, so after you simplify that root, you still need to multiply that outside number into the other one. Okay? Questions on number 6?
Yeah, how did you get 72?
8 times 9 in the front. So you want to multiply your numbers on the outside of your root and the ones on the inside. Good question. Others?
So you just multiply the 8 and the 9 and then the 6 and the 2?
Yes. All right, then we're going to do number 7. So this one is very similar to number 2. If you understood what we were doing in number 2, keep going forward. But I'm going to do number 7 here. So since we have this square root in the denominator, we have to multiply by a version of 1. Okay, that version of 1 has to be your number in the denominator. So I want to multiply by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. Because I know that those roots will cancel out in the denominator then. So since I'm multiplying fractions, I want to multiply straight across. Okay, so I have 4 times the square root of 5 over square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. Okay, I can take the square root of 25 so that I end up with 4 square root of 5 over 5. Now I can't simplify this any further. 4/5 doesn't divide evenly, so I would just circle that answer or box that answer to know that I'm done. Okay, so I can leave it like that. Yep.
Wait, if you square root of 25, it's 5.
Yep.
Yeah, so once you do 4 times 5, it'll be like 20 over.
Because when I'm multiplying right here, I'm multiplying my 5s in the denominator. So it stays in the denominator.
Okay.
So I have the square root of 25 in the denominator, not the numerator.
Wait, then how's it different than 2?
It's not different than 2. It's the same type of problem, but in number 2, I could simplify my fraction part right here. Because I could take 12 divided by 3. Down here, I can't take 4 divided by 5.
Oh,
Does that make more sense? Yeah? Okay. Other questions on 7? All right. What are my two numbers that it can multiply together so I can simplify the square root of 40? Go ahead, Dawn. Shh. Hey. Raise your hands. Not 9 and 5, but close.
4 and 10. 8 and 5.
4 and 10.
So we're going to just be 2 times?
Yep. So then I end up with 2 square roots of 10.
I love how we just got back in here.
It's good.
All
All right, questions on how I did 8?
Is this just
Very
our
similar.
homework?
It's similar to this.
Okay. Any triangles?
No.
Okay.
All right. Last 2 problems here. Shh. Last 2 problems here. Number 9 has a variable in it. It is an A. So what I can do here is I can separate this. Okay, just like I was doing before. So I can separate it into the square root of 16 times the square root of A squared. Okay, so I can separate that into 2 different square roots. Now looking at it, the square root of 16 is 4. And if I square root an A squared, what happens? You just get A.
So 4 times 8 is just 4.
It's just 4A.
And then the next one is this. The question, isn't that next
Do
one?
number 10. Once you do number 10 and you show me that you have the right answer, I can give you your assignment.
You square root it.
No, this is gonna make
No. Oh, it's all take hours.
Got it.
Ma'am, this has 25 numbers on one side. Oh, it's got 28.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Oh no.
I'm going to write your work down.
During 8 then, so she just went to it, but I assumed it was gonna be at 8. So I assumed it would be
That's a pretty simple one.
yeah. I think I was gonna yeah, she's out with so I don't think
All right, I think everybody has one. Thing? Did I get everybody?
it's perfect.
All right. Shh, quiet down.